Greetings, everybody. This is Todd V with TikTok Talk, and tonight I'm have the absolute pleasure to be talking to Nicholas Bowman-Scargill. How are you doing tonight, Nicholas?
I'm really good, thank you. I'm really good. It's been a long day, but no, it's good. I'm in a good place, and it's always lovely talking to you. So it's lovely to talk to you one on one here.
For sure. Thank you so much. And as you say that, it's almost no, it's after 10 p.m. your time, so I really
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time. So we're talking because this is a very special week, and I think I've already seen a glimpse of this special week on your wrist. So what are you wearing today?
Yes. So my wrist check is a very special piece that we launched on Friday last week, and will be going on sale in a couple of days' time. It's a collaborative watch we've made with Christopher Ward, but the main thing is we've made it for the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers. And yeah, this is a special watch for many reasons. Not only creating a beautiful watch, but when it does go on sale, we're both brands are donating 100% of the profit to our trade body, which is the Alliance. So it's nice to be in a position to do that, and it's nice to wear a watch knowing how it's going to help benefit the British watch industry.
Yeah, I'm very excited about what you guys are doing. I wish we had something like that in the US. I have a watchmaker that I love to go to, and he laments that no young people are want to be in this industry, and that's a problem, But you guys seem to be having a boom over there.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because I was actually talking to someone earlier today about this. How one of the reasons why the alliance has come about is because yes, there are more and more watch brands, and watch brands are need watchmakers. I was saying to you earlier, just before we started recording, how we're about to start putting out a job description for recruiting our first watchmaker. Right now, downstairs beneath where I'm sat is a space that's been converted into a workshop. So we're looking for people, but we're very lucky that on the other side, there are a lot of young people who are going, hey, I actually would like a career that's a little bit different. And so there are courses, horological courses in the UK, and people are attending those. Now, where the Alliance comes in is to do a few things. Partly, it's to help actually bring watchmakers, young watchmakers, and the watch brands together. But another thing is, yeah, we've got people going through the schools at the moment. Great. But as you're probably aware, a watchmaker apprenticeship, the schooling can be about 3 years, and then the apprenticeship continues. So you're looking at 5 to 7 years until someone's, qualified. And even then, they'll always learn. I mean, when I was at Rolex, our master watchmaker in the workshop, I asked him, one day rather naively, like, at what point did you feel like you knew everything? And he looked at me at 75 years old and said, I don't think I'll ever reach that point. So when you think of it like that, you go, right, it's not just about the people in the schools today. The Alliance can help them and help connect them with employers. But right now, how are we going to try and encourage 15, 16-year-olds who are at that stage now where they're being told, right, careers fairs, what do you want to be when you're older? Like, how do we start even getting watchmaking or a job in the horological industry, like to register? I said to someone with Roger Smith how he was talking about industry and why it's so important to acknowledge it. And I said, put it this way, if you're applying for your credit card or an insurance, and it has a drop down list of like what is your career, what is your profession, it will never have watchmaker or industry. It will never say watch industry. And so that's just a little thing. That means it just doesn't even register. And yet, we do have a thriving watch industry in the UK. We have over 77 trade brands, which are part of the Alliance British Watch and Clockmakers. We have different schools teaching me. We have all of this going on. So it's about how do we try and help it? How do we try and bring it together? And I think this is one of those moments where I'm very lucky, 6 years into re-establishing Fears, that I'm able to work with Mike France, a good friend of mine at Christopher Ward, And both of our companies are able to put in not only time, effort, and money, but if you think of the amount of resource that we're putting into producing these watches, and then we're saying, hey, we're not keeping a penny profit, it's all going to help fund the Alliance, which is a not for profit. I feel proud that we're at a position of our journey where we're able to do that and help benefit other brands and watchmakers in our country.
Well, and that's on speaking to that, and I want to kind of circle back on a couple of things, but I think that's probably what's exciting about maybe being a watchmaker, what you just said, in that, you could be a man who works, or a man or person who works in a factory, and that job never changes. And you kind of have that burnout where if you're always having on this adventure of learning and adding new skills, I think that's a pretty exciting prospect for somebody to look at.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, there is so much to be said for doing a job with your hands. I mean, the job I was doing before I became an apprentice at Rolex, involved being sat in front of a computer all day, talking on the phone. I mean, the cruel irony is you fast forward all these years to me today, and what do I do as managing director of a watch company? I sit in front of a computer answering phones all day. So it's nice to see how life has this cruel way of coming back and biting you. But the reason I wanted to become a watchmaker was I just relished the idea of, at the end of the day, you could point to a pile of boxes and say, I did that. That's the difference I made, rather than just moving pixels around on the screen. And to be frank, in this office we're a team of 7 people now, and what's incredible is everyone has a little, their own little role within everything. It sounds very cliche to say, oh, everyone's a cog in a machine, and but everyone realizes that, I told everyone on our WhatsApp group on Friday night after the launch of the Alliance 01, actually the reason this was able to happen was because of something every single person did. And some of those things seem very, insignificant, like, our dispatch manager, booking the couriers to make sure this watch goes from one journalist to the next. That just seems like a day job sort of thing. But actually, what they've done is actually help ensure that this beautiful object that we've created goes to the right people so that the message can go out around the world. And I know my head of operations, who has the somewhat thankless task of trying to keep all of our suppliers in check and make sure watches get built. You should see his face when we actually receive built watches, and they've been QC'd, and every single time he's like a kid at Christmas. I mean, he'll be embarrassed for me revealing this, but it's that thing where he's like, oh my goodness, all this work, all those phone calls, all those emails, and we've created these objects. And I think, no, whether it's just something slightly primeval, it's just a lovely sensation creating something. For me, that's the magic. Whether you're a watchmaker servicing a watch, or whether you work in a watch company doing maybe nothing to do with watchmaking, but you do a role that contributes in these beautiful objects, mechanical sculptures on the wrist, actually coming into existence.
It's funny you say that. That's a culture where I work that is they try to bring that down, even though there's thousands of people there. Then we have this expression that our boots on the ground help put the boots on the moon. And so it's,
Yeah,
we all have our little bit to help to accomplish that mission. So it's the same thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I really like that. I really like that, because it's, it really does remind you that, yeah, these things don't just happen because of, the one person who is stepping off a spacecraft into, or a module, or onto the moon surface. Like, to get to that point, there are just so many people involved. And I think it's important to recognize it. And that's why, for me, when people say, oh, it's amazing what you've created, I'm like, no, it's amazing what the company has created. I
Now
can
it's
come up with the idea, but everyone else is what actually brings it to life and makes it real.
I will say though, let's not pull too much away from you, because doing what you did is awesome. And you have one of the coolest stories, I think, in the watch nerd world, that you had this brand that was your great grandfather's, and you said, I'm going to restart that brand. That is Very cool. And this was only by, you were a one man band for a while.
Oh
So it
yes, I
was
mean
you.
until October 2019, yeah, it was all me,
Yeah.
and it is also actually that is a good point because we talk a lot about the heritage of Fears, and I always see Fears as a British watch company that happens to have this heritage. But yeah, Fears closed in 1976 when my great grandfather retired and then sadly passed away. Fast forward 39 years, I bring it back to life. But when I brought it back to life, I think a lot of people assume there was just this dormant company ticking away and I revitalized it. No, I mean, I had to do everything from re-registering the company, re-registering the trademarks. We had no existing supplier relationships. And it's sometimes that thing where occasionally I'll see the odd comment where people will say on a video or a post like, oh, well, good for him. He just inherited the family business. And I always just smile and think, oh, wait, no, 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 no. That is absolutely not what happened. But it always makes me smile because I always think, even if I had, that doesn't guarantee you any kind of success or any kind of, making a difference. Um, and I think, it is that. I mean, look, I left a job at Rolex. I had what can only be described as an incredibly enjoyable job. The pay was okay. It wasn't stellar, but it was good enough. But I also had job security, like bulletproof job security. And I said, don't want any of that. Why would I want to wake up in the morning and know where next month's paycheck's coming from or have a pension or anything like that? And, I think that's sometimes the thing people, it's very easy for people to kind of look at it and go, well, oh, well, they've just done this and I don't like the watch or whatever. And it's like, okay, fine. That's subjective about the product. But I have so much admiration for anyone who is willing to poke their head up above the precipice and say, hey, I want to try and do something. And also bear in mind, when you're doing something like this, where you're making a product and you're putting a lot of you in the product, you know, don't get me wrong, bad comments still hurt. They cut deep. I mean, over the years, you do learn to kind of, not let it ruin your day. It can ruin an hour. It doesn't have to ruin a day. But it is funny how, even now after 6 years, and we've been blessed with having had successful launches, and we now have Fears owners around the world and a huge amount of support. And I'm always grateful for that, and we'll never take it for granted. But even now, when I read a comment that's cutting about the watch or cutting about what I'm doing with the company, yeah, it takes a moment to go, like, okay, I'm just going to close my phone, step away, process that, and not get upset. And it's upset. It's not anger. It's upset because, I care a lot. I care a lot about what I do.
So what I was going to ask is, so I want to talk about the watch now.
Yeah.
And how I am as you know, a huge fan of Christopher Ward. It was one of those brands when I was early in my collecting and they popped up, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to spend my hard-earned money with, this brand that just came out and it has some other guy's name on my wrist, like as opposed to like a Seiko or a Tudor where there's a brand that's solid. Fears
Yeah.
even has a good brand name, and there was a lot of guys early on that were like, oh, but then I absolutely fell in love because they make these amazing watches.
Yeah.
And so how did you end up collaborating with, how did you end up picking that, and how did this all start?
So, I mean, to go right back, it's how did I meet Mike France? And I'm very lucky to, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. I don't think Mike would tell me off for this. I consider him a good friend. He is a good friend. I know I've got to know him very well over the last few years, and I met him years ago, like 2017, 18, probably 17 even, at another brand's watch event. And I think we were both there, sort of like eyeing up the competition and seeing what was going on. And I, of course, knew who he was. Um, and so, me being me, I sort of went up to him and was like, "Oh, fancy seeing you here as well. Like, have you checked out what they've launched and stuff?" And we sort of had a joke that we'd both realized why we were there. Anyway, we got chatting away, and he obviously knew about the Fear story, which I was at first very surprised about. I didn't know he even knew who I was. But then he very kindly a few months later, had the editors of Loop magazine, the Christopher Ward magazine, have a piece in there about Fizz and about me and what I was doing, and that was incredible, because I was like, hang on, this other brand is putting me and my brand in their magazine. Like that sort of that idea and openness and that willingness to share the stage really I found incredible. And from that, it then sort of built. We stayed in contact. We'd see each other at different industry events. Anyway, we fast forward to 2019, and I was on a cruise with my mother around the fjords, and I get off at Stavanger, this lovely Norwegian port, and my phone rings. It's a UK number, don't know who it is, and I answer it, and it's Mike France, and he's saying, "Hey, Roger Smith and I are thinking of setting up this trade association called, at this time it doesn't have a name, but basically it'd be there for brands to assist brands and help bring things together. We would be interested to know whether you would like to be one of the founding partners of this." And I immediately was just like, yes, I don't know anything about this, but I said to him, from my perspective, I've always seen the benefit of more brands working together than trying to compete against each other, especially when you look at our tiny little island, where we are. We're going, why am I fighting against other British brands when you've got this, absolute giant of the Swiss industry? And that's not to knock the Swiss industry, but it's going, what if we were to kind of just actually work together a little bit, holding hands, actually kind of going, rather than looking at each other, we all look out together and go, what is it that we can offer the world and the world's collectors and enthusiasts? And so when Mike suggested this, I said, absolutely. So later that summer, there was a meeting at the Foreign Office between Mike, Roger, myself, and a couple of other brands. And we all came to the conclusion that, yeah, this made sense. We wanted to do this. And so, I was incredibly honored to be invited at this early doors. And so when it launched in November 2020, I'd been involved with, naming it, helping, things, in the background, helping also to recruit other brands to take part, because nothing like this has existed before. So a lot of brands were maybe quite rightly suspicious. They were a bit like, what is this? Why should I be part of this thing? And everyone's being very chatty and open, and I don't think I know, and I'm not sure if I want to do that. And, so, wary, I think less suspicious and more wary. Anyway, we launched, I can't remember how many brands we launched with, but it was far more than we ever thought we would. And what was quite funny was in the weeks leading up to it, they'd built up a list of researching, finding brands, and they built up a list, and it became a joke at the Alliance that, everyone would be like, oh, do we know anyone at so-and-so? And it'd be like, ask Nicholas. He's probably had a pint with them. So all my years of taking watch brand owners out for drinks obviously paid off. They were like, right, well, Nicholas knows them, so let him talk to them. Anyway, we launch, and people were a bit puzzled. They were a bit like, I don't know what the Alliance is. Is it a club? Is it a group? Is it trying to be the British version of Swiss Made? What is it? And hopefully I've conveyed a bit of what it is. It is a trade organization there to promote British watchmaking, but also to help the industry, help forge connections. If I'm looking for a supplier for making watch straps, say, now I'm lucky that I've got a phone book full of people I could contact, but say I don't have that phone book, I can go to the Alliance as a brand and say, hey, could you reach out to the members, the other brands, and see if anyone's got a contact or is willing to make an introduction? That forging relationships, that's what the Alliance is there for. And it's not for profit, which is why it needs donations from members of the public through their club membership, but also through things like the profit from the sale of the swatch. Anyway, we're having one of these early, end of 2020, Alliance's launch. We're having like a Christmas drinks all together. And it's during the pandemic, during the UK lockdown at Christmas. So we're having to do this remotely. Anyway, And we were saying, oh, wouldn't it be a lovely thing to offer the club members, as well as having access to exclusive online events, as well as getting subscriptions to magazines? What if we were to make a special collaborative watch that only they could buy? We're like, oh, this would be great. And we're chatting away about this. And then Mike sort of jokingly goes, oh, hey, Nicholas, you and I should do it. Wouldn't that be good? We could make something special. And we're all going, that's wonderful. I assumed he was joking because at this point, Fears is a fraction of the size it is today. And don't get me wrong, we're still a small company today. We made 480 watches last year. So we're not exactly a big company. Building 50 watches is over 10% of our production from last year. Anyway, the next morning I wake up and there's an email in my inbox from Mike saying, so I've been thinking about it overnight. We should do this. Like, are you up for it? Would you be up for it? What do you think? Am I being silly? And I went back straight away and just said, let's make it happen. Let's do it. I think this is brilliant. And that then started a process in 21 and 22 to not only design the watch, then engineer it, bring it to life. And, both of us have invested a lot of our company's resources into doing this, because it's not just oh, well, we'll use this case. And, they retired this movement in 2017. So they had to get the tooling out of the cupboard and, literally restart up production for just 50 pieces. So it's been a bit of a labor of love. There have been moments where it's been causing problems and stresses, but I think it's one of those things where, so last night I did an Instagram live with Will, the designer, from Christopher Ward, who helped with the design work. And he sent me a message this morning saying, I actually feel a bit sad that in a few days this project's done. The watch is officially launched and our involvement in it is, has come to an end. I've rather enjoyed working with the Fears team and it's been rather good. And it was that sudden moment where I was like, oh my goodness, yeah, because my team have suddenly been learning working with the Christopher Ward team. We're tiny, they're bigger. And we as a company have learned and benefited looking at how they operate, but then also when it comes to some of the ways we've done our storytelling, our marketing, the way we present our brand. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that they've looked at it and gone, that's really interesting, because we do things different. We're different companies, but we've definitely learned and benefited from each other.
Well, and that's an amazing part of this whole story. Do you think, I guess where I'm going is it's early on, and I know the sales haven't officially begun, but for the last week, I have seen this watch constantly on YouTube. Adrian Barker's talking about it. Britt Pierce is talking about it. It's in the Instagram, on everybody's blog. Do you think this will inspire future collaborations within the British Watchmakers Alliance?
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. I think, it's very weird. I say it's weird how we've launched it, but there was a strong reason why I was in favor of doing it this way. Usually you launch a watch, you release it, and it goes on sale straight away. And I said, no. I want to launch this, and there is so much to talk about. You can't do that in a simple web page. I want to talk about it, but over the course of a week in different formats, in different ways, and highlighting different elements. Like as we're talking about some of the more business aspects of it, there's so many facets of the Alliance 01 watch, but also it is only available to club members. Now, there are 50 pieces. There are literally, I can't count, less than a handful, because which have been basically allocated to Mike, to Roger Smith, to myself. Because, as much as we want to say, no, there's all 50, we're going, no, you know what? We really want to own this watch, and we're the ones who have been working on it. So I hope people won't be disappointed to know that we have, we've earmarked one each for ourselves, because for us it's going, actually this is a lot, it's an accumulation of a lot of work, but it's also a very nice physical representation of what all three of us have done in building the Alliance. and doing the work. And, you know, the naysayers in the early doors saying, why do we need this? This won't work. People won't work with each other. And here we are in our third year operating. And, you know, for me, when I look at this watch, I see a beautiful watch. I've always loved jump hours. So, you know, that's great. That's a nice positive. But actually, when I see this watch, I see, you know, my friendship with Mike, my friendship with Roger, and how it's our relationship has developed over the years from those very early days of the alliance. And I look at it and I also see what we're doing. And, you know, I hope that other brands in the alliance will go, you know what, we would like to make the alliance so too. And I think it's important to say this isn't top down. Okay, fine. Mike, myself, we're founding members of the alliance, and we decide to do this. But it's important, you know, to make sure people realize it's not that the alliance are going and picking two brands and saying, "Be friends, make a beautiful watch." Oh, and give us 100% of the profit. There's absolutely none of this. This is something where it has to happen organically. And you know, I've been absolutely blown away by the coverage, the conversation this watch has generated. I mean, you know, here we are 5 days, nearly 5 days after the watch was first announced, and people are still talking about it. We are getting phone calls constantly with people wanting to reserve a watch, and we're having to say, sorry, we can't do that. You know, the alliance itself, its club membership has almost doubled in the last 5 days, which is
Sure.
just incredible. But, you know, the fact is, this watch had two goals from the off. The first one was to raise the awareness of the alliance, what it does for the industry, and therefore raising British watchmaking. You know, when you're listening to American podcasts or watching, you know, videos from around the world of people talking about British watchmaking, you're saying, right, goal one is very much being, you know, done. This isn't us looking in on an island. This is us talking to the world. Two, it's also about doing the, you know, the practical thing of helping to generate, you know, generating funds for the alliance to continue its next phases of development and growth around education, and, you know, helping build that. So the first, you know, the first goal, I'm proud to say, I think we've done that. I mean, we were going through the other yesterday and realized that actually we've had more coverage on this watch than any watch we've ever launched. And that's incredible. Like, that really is incredible, because I'm very proud of our previous launches, but it's amazing to see that this one is the one that's really gone far and wide. And, you know, I think this is where you look at it and say, actually, other brands hopefully will go, I can see, if I'm at the right stage of my business and I can afford to, how, you know, it will be a good thing to help everyone else out.
Do you think I've got a couple of follow-up questions to that. You bring up so many interesting points. So one, do you think maybe the timing of this right behind the Bel Canto, which was such a huge hit and such a success, not to take anything away from you, but also help fears, but also there was this sort of surge of like, what's happening over there with these British watchmakers?
So there absolutely was. And I can say categorically, it was not planned. It was not planned this way around.
Yeah.
So originally the Alliance 01 was going to launch at the end of the summer last year, but our case manufacturer in Germany, they had quite a few bouts of COVID, and sadly had to keep stopping production and restarting, and it was just dragging on and on and on. And in the end, we realized we were going to miss that deadline, so we said, oh, we'll do it on this date. That got missed, and another one got missed. And in the end, we got to the point where we're like, right, well, we know we can launch it in January, and January is a weird month to announce watches, because it's sort of a no man's land in a way. But it has been a very pleasant coincidence, because, Christopher Ward, like yourself, I've been obviously a huge admirer for many, many, many years. And globally, they've had, good reputation, lots of people knowing them. The Bel Canto has been transformative, you know.
Yeah. I'd
It's
say.
introduced so many new people to the brand, but it's also got people going, sorry, a British brand did this? What?
Right.
It's so years and years ago, before I was at Rolex, I spent a few years working at a PR company. And I always remember on my first day being told, when it comes to a story, you know, dog bites man, not a story. Man bites dog. Now that's the story. And it's that
Yeah.
thing of suddenly going, you know, if a Swiss company had brought out the Bel Canto, a lot of people would have gone, "Oh wow, isn't that wonderful? Isn't it? Great price." The fact that yes, and I appreciate, Christopher Ford has their Swiss arm that they work with, but they're primarily a British company.
Mhm.
The design team, the headquarters, everything is in Britain in that regard, and yeah, it definitely had a good effect for not only increasing people's awareness of the Christopher Ward brand, but also for the way that it's suddenly got people going, hang on, what is happening over there? Like,
Right.
what happened? They had their lockdowns and now their pandemic's over. It's just like all these fireworks of exciting things. And I mean, when I was at Wind Up in New York in October, Fears was there with our North American retailer collective Horology. And we were one of, I think it was 9 British brands were there.
Wow.
And I know that because every single night I strong armed all the owners of the different brands to go out to the pub with me. And
Sure.
it was really funny because we ended up having to like take over an area of the pub because we had so many people there, and it was just so lovely. Brits abroad, of course, having a few too many pints. We've all seen the Instagram videos, but it was
Oh,
wonderful to be there together and suddenly go, oh my goodness, we're all here. This is incredible. Whereas in previous years, there's been 2, maybe 3 British brands. That was the most there had ever been at a US fair. And yeah, there is definitely a resurgence, but I think it's because a lot of brands of a similar age to Fears, everyone's kind of beginning to find their stride. And I think also a big, very important thing, we're beginning to realize we don't have to trade off our heritage. And, bear with me, I run a company with 176 years history, but actually, when you look at Fears today, we are more known for our design and for the quality of finishing than we are for the history. The history is the cherry on top. And then you start looking around at other brands, you're going, wow, we're seeing less of people harking back to, the Second World War, the E-type Jaguar, these very British iconic events. And we're seeing more people going, what's what's British today? What's the new Britain? And I think some of this is probably linked also to, you may have heard of a little thing called Brexit. Well, the
right.
thing with Brexit is it did give the country this massive sort of, you know, eyeglass, looking back at ourselves and going, look in the mirror. What is Britain today? Who are we? What are we about? And I think we're beginning to see this. I call it modern Britannia. It's we had Cool Britannia with Jerry Halliwell back in the 2000s, but today
Right.
we've now got modern Britannia, and I think what Christopher Ward have been doing, what the likes of Thera have been doing, you know what I hope people would say what Fears is doing. We're doing stuff that is looking forwards, not backwards.
I would agree with you on all of that. But the other question I had related to that was the timing of the British clock. Is it the clock and watchmakers, right? British clock and watchmakers,
Watch and
watch and
clock makers.
clockmakers alliance. Got it. Um, you were kind of in your infancy as Fears, and yet
Yeah,
you're there with Roger Smith and Emma, one of the top guys in the whole industry, and
yeah.
Christopher Ward was on their upswing. Do you think that also helped with Fears kind of you are out there so much more than so many other brands of your age. You're so much more visible, so much more attention. Do you think that helped being part of that alliance so early?
I do. I do. I think, I still remember going to that first meeting in the Foreign Office and looking around the room. And at the time, it was, I was Fears.
Yeah.
I knew that when I got the train home that evening, I had to dispatch watches. And I remember at the end of the meeting, Roger Smith turned to me and said, hey, nice to meet you. I know who you are. Like, if you've got a bit of time, do you fancy grabbing a gin and tonic? And of course, I was just like, what is
Yes.
happening? How has my life choices got me to this point where I'm
Yeah.
about to go to a pub and have a gin and tonic with Roger? And I'm sorry, people think I'm a huge alcoholic. I keep talking about these stories, but anyone
Yeah.
who's been to Britain will know a lot of British business, a lot of British interaction is done in the pub. Anyway, and I remember sat there thinking, oh my goodness, I need to go home and get watches dispatched, but I can't, I can't leave. This is so incredible. And it definitely helped, but it also very quickly maybe I had to sort of, for want of a better phrase, punch above my weight. There I am
Yeah.
in this room with all these people, but it made me suddenly have the confidence to go, they have actually asked me to be in this room. I
Right.
didn't gate crash this meeting. They asked me here because they are actually interested in what I want to do or what I'm thinking about and how I see the future of the industry. And it took me quite a while, quite a lot of months to actually let that sink in and go, actually, I have been going for quite a few years and I do have a voice. And, it's a very British trait to not acknowledge when you have done things okay, right? In America, it's encouraged to celebrate, your success as I believe it should be.
To a
Whereas in the
fault. To a
UK,
fault.
if well,
I mean,
no,
have you
but
seen TikTok?
no, well, yeah, no, that's that's actually a dangerous avenue. But it's we're very much if you do okay in the UK, you're meant to keep quiet about it. And I think what we're seeing today is British brands. And I said this on a panel discussion at Wind Up alongside Mike, alongside Richard Benck, my good friend who runs Studio Underdog, and also Johnny Garrett of William Wood Watches. And someone said, why are things different now? What's happening? And I said, you know what? I'm going to speak on behalf of these three gents here. We're ambitious. And we're ambitious not just for ourselves, but for our industry. And that's something that I don't think we've had before. I think everything has been very reserved. But you know what? You go through something, and I'm sorry to people for keep going on about the pandemic, but you go through something like that. If you survive it, as a business, you come out fighting stronger. And I think there, the conversation with other brands in the UK is, for quite a few of us, we realized actually, you know what, we had to fight for survival. You know of my story. I actually spent 3 months working at a supermarket on night shifts to literally save the company from bankruptcy. You get to the end of that, and you think, you know what, sod it. I do actually want to, grow this business. I do actually want to see British watches grow and succeed as an industry. I don't want to just be very British and go apologize for it. Go, oh no. We're very happy being, small and a little thing. We've actually gone, no, we have a voice and we have something that we can bring to the table. And people say, well, what is that? Don't tell me about Harwood and his automatic movement. Don't tell me about the escapement. Don't talk to me about, the tourbillon. That was an invention from Arnold. Let's don't talk about the past. So what is British watchmaking today? And I think actually what is it? It's the fact that we as individual companies design our watches with a clear idea of some watches are more military, some are sportier, some in my case are down the more elegant, more understated route. But the fact is, I think it's very rare to find a British watch that is dull, that is cold. I think when you look at most watches from British brands, there's always this little sparkle. There's always this twinkle. And I think that's a very British thing. It's part of our dry sense of humor. It's part of our, we can be all formal and then you loosen the tie and you're a party animal. It's that playfulness. And I think, not to knock, Swiss brands, but they can do things like elegance and understated. but sometimes it can be a little cold. It hasn't got that like graceful character to it. And I think that is something that we is very nuanced, but I think it is something that we do well in Britain. The other thing we do well is, you know, let's be frank, we don't have case makers, dial makers, movement makers here in the UK. We have to go abroad to source our components. When you look at major engineering projects around the world, quite often the people on the ground coordinating, you know, the engineers, the locals, the local police, the authorities, you know, the architects, the designers, all those people, they actually tend to be Brits. And why? We've just seemed to have a bit of a knack for working with lots of moving parts, and project management doesn't sound very sexy, but when you run a watch company, it's really important, especially if you're going to go to this case maker or this movement maker or this hand maker. And, you know, you've got, you know, I think to build a watch like this, we're actually working with 20 suppliers. That's 20 individual companies, and any one can disrupt the whole thing. We have huge Gantt charts, but also, you know, it was very interesting. Earlier today, I was chatting with my head of operations, a charming guy called Robert, and, you know, he was talking about how, you know, some of our suppliers are, you know, really going above and beyond with the work they're doing with us. And I said, but that's because you have such a good way of working with them. You know, that's why they're willing to, you know, to work with us. It really is partnerships. It's not a supplier client relationship. So a very long-winded, you know, answer, but I think it's kind of trying to convey this idea of, you know, actually things like the Bel Canto have got people looking at Britain. You know, the Alliance really has got people around the world looking at it. And fundamentally with the Alliance watch, and from day one, I always said, and Mike agreed, that if you removed the name from the dial, if you removed the Alliance story, if you removed all of that, if you put it on your wrist, do you go look at it and go, that's a damn fine watch? And as long as you can say that, then that's all that matters. And that's why we didn't want it to at any point feel like Alliance merch. We didn't want it to feel like it was from the gift shop. We didn't want to cover it with everyone's logos on the dial and make it feel like you were buying it in some sort of sense of charity. No, you know, if you like the watch and you think it's something you're going to enjoy owning and wearing, then that's the person I want to buy it. The knowledge that you are helping and supporting the Alliance and what it's doing for the industry, that really should be secondary.
I have another question related to that on the Alliance, because you mentioned earlier on, like, what do you? It's where someone was going. What do you think this is? It means like it's Swiss made. And Adrian Barker actually had a great suggestion, and I don't know if you watched his video. And I'm very curious now that I can talk to you about the hallmark.
Yes,
So
yes. And so that was something that genuinely has not been discussed by anyone. But I watched that video and I thought, I really like that. I really like that. And I think just put it on the underside of the lug. And I'll be honest, it was something that on Monday, my goodness, that was only yesterday. That yesterday I did mention to my head of operations about, and I did say, look, when you're next speaking to the case maker, can you find out if they can just do that? Like, is that something we could just do? I think it's something where there needs to be a broader story around it. But I like that idea. I like that thing of saying, look, it's subtle, it's discreet, but it's a way of saying proudly, you know, I am a member of the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers. I am British Watches.
I think it would be a very cool thing if you could get buy-in from all of the members to say, from now on, our watches will have this stamp. It would be such a.
I just worry at what point, you know, Adrian comes to us all with his cap in hand saying, right, well, I need my royalties for this idea. But, you know,
fair enough. Great question.
Hats off to him, because I think the fact that he made that comment, he made that thing, you know, he was thinking about that. It's that kind of thinking. It's saying we don't, you know, I put England at the bottom of our dials. We assemble all of our watches here in England, and I'm proud of being, you know, British and English, and so we want to put that. But we don't have that kind of mark. But I also think actually the mark should be something a little more esoteric. And so when Adrian said that, I thought, good on you, Adrian. That really is a cracking idea. Well done. You really have, you know, you've come up with a good one there.
Yeah, and I think that is a cool thing about this new watch of yours, how it is stamped on the bottom, England. I was I hold on to my Christopher Ward, I think it's the C9, because it says London on it. And I just think that's the coolest thing. And I wish they kept that, but you know, they're truly not made in London 100%, like you said. So I don't know what the rules are on it, but I loved that idea. So is there anything else you'd like to share that I haven't asked you? I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's now 11 UK time. And I'm sure
it's good.
You need to go to bed at some point.
at some point I'll sleep. I think I'll sleep at the weekend. I think, you know, my final thing I would try and convey to people is, you know, you don't need to go out and buy a British watch. You really don't. You need to go out and buy a watch that you love and that you will cherish and you'll enjoy, you know. But what I would say is when you look at British watchmakers, I think it's good to realize, you know, we're a small country, and you know there are a few brands, but a lot of these brands are run in a very small way. You know, Fears is, you know, we're in the top 10 biggest watch companies in the UK. I employ 7 people. We made 480 watches last year. So just let that sink in and go, you know, if you're getting a watch, and I'm not saying, you know, come buy a watch from Fizz. I'm just saying, if you come and buy a watch from, you know, or consider buying a watch at any price point, you know, from £20 to £20,000 from a British brand, you know, you are making a difference to those people who are running those companies. You know, most of the British watch brands that are members of the Alliance, you know, I think on average, a British watch company employs 1.3 people. So that gives you an idea of just how many one-man bands there are compared to the Braemonts, the Christopher Wards, and, you know, further down in that top 10, the Fearses. So and again, you shouldn't be supporting people out of charity, but I think it's that thing of just consider, and this is what I'd always say when looking at small brands versus big brands. Big brands have a place. I own big brands in my collection. I love them. Of course, I used to work for one of the biggest, but I would always say, just, you know, it's like the equivalent to going to a farmer's market. You know, when you're buying, you know, that chicken or those vegetables from the person who's grown it and put so much care and effort into it, it makes a disproportionate amount of impact beyond, you know, the pounds or dollars spent. And so I think that's something I would kind of leave as a thing. Visit britishwatchmakers.com. It is a really good site. It's got video, it's got some great photos, it's got some great content. You know, it's a really good starting place if you're, you know, you've heard of the odd British brand. You can Google British watch companies. Yeah, we're all fighting for the SEO top spot, but actually, if you go to britishwatchmakers.com, it's your kind of one pool resource with all that information and history about what has occurred in the past. You know, if you're interested in owning an Alliance 01, then, you know, by midnight on Thursday GMT, you know, be signed up as a club member, and then on Friday you'll have the opportunity to acquire one. But, you know, at this point, I just really want to thank everyone for their support. You know, you mentioned how you've seen it being commented and shared, and, you know, 5 days after a launch, people are still talking about it. That is mind blowing, and I'm just very grateful for people, you know, giving the time to share what we're trying to do here. So thank you. It means a lot.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm very excited about what you're doing, and I can't wait to see what you guys are doing next. Big fan of what you're putting together.